Hi boys and girls, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about fractions as tenths and hundredths. So over here we have the directions of use greater than, less than, or equal to compare the fractions. Now we know we cannot compare fractions unless the denominators are the same. But there's a bit of a trick to use whenever we're comparing tenths and hundredths or hundredths with tenths. Before we start our work, I want to draw your attention to my place value chart right here. We know that when we're writing out our numbers, we have ones place, tens place, hundreds place. These are all considered whole numbers. I know that if I want to move a number from a ones place, let's say over to the tens place, I would multiply by 10. For example, 5 times 10 equals 50. Now my 5 has turned into a 50. It's moved from the ones place to the tens place. That same thing happens when I'm working with decimals or fractions. If I have a number in my tenths place, so say I have 5 tenths, and I want to turn it into a hundredth, I still multiply by 10. I could do 5 tenths times 10 times 10. Remember with fractions, what we do to the bottom, we do to the top. And that would give me 50 hundredths. I've now turned my tenths into hundredths. So the same rules apply. Whenever we want to take one number and move it to the next place value over, we multiply by 10. Let's take a look at our first problem. 6 tenths compared with 70 hundredths. I know I cannot compare these fractions because they do not have the same denominator. So I'm going to take my 6 tenths, and what could I multiply by to turn it into hundredths? If you said 10, you're right. I multiply it by 10 by 10, and that gives me 6 times 10 is 60, and 10 times 10 is 100. I turn my 6 tenths into 60 hundredths. Now I can compare, so my 6 tenths turned into 60 hundredths compared with 70 hundredths. What symbol would I use? If you said less than, you're correct. 60 hundredths is less than 70 hundredths. Let's try another one. 5 tenths compared with 9 hundredths. Again, I cannot compare these fractions because they do not have the same denominator. One is a 10, one is a 100. I'm going to take my 5 tenths and I want to make it into hundredths. So again, going back to what we already talked about, I'm going to multiply by 10. Remember, what you do to the bottom, do to the top. 5 times 10 is 50, and 10 times 10 is 100. Now they have the same denominator. My 5 tenths turned into 50 hundredths. I can rewrite to compare 50 hundredths compared with 9 hundredths. What symbol would I use to compare? If you said greater than, you're correct. 50 hundredths is definitely greater than 9 hundredths. Now, I do want to show you another way you can complete these as well. While you can multiply by 10, I can also take my fraction with a larger denominator of 100 and I can work backwards, so I can divide by 10. I'll show you what I mean. If I want to turn my hundredths into tenths, I can take 90 hundredths and I want to make it smaller, so I divide by 10 and divide by 10. 90 divided by 10 is 9, and 100 divided by 10 is 10. So now instead of working with hundredths, I'm working with tenths, and I can compare 9 tenths compared with 7 tenths. What symbol would I use to compare these? If you said greater than, you're correct. 9 tenths is greater than 7 tenths. Let's try one more. Here I have 50 hundredths compared with 5 tenths. Again, I'm going to turn now my hundredths into tenths. So instead of multiplying, I'm going to divide because I'm making my number smaller. Divide by 10, divide by 10. 50 divided by 10 is equal to 5. 100 divided by 10 is equal to 10. Now I'm comparing 5/10 compared with 5/10. What symbol would I use here? If you said equal, you would be correct. 5/10 is equal with 5/10. So boys and girls, whether you're multiplying by 10 or dividing by 10, make sure whatever you're doing to turn your denominators into the same number. If you both want your denominator to be 10, take your tenths and multiply by 10. If you want to turn your hundredths into tenths, take your hundredths and divide by 10. Thanks for tuning in and hope this video helped.